All right, like I said, this is our Innovation Forum series focused on cardiovascular health. I am Nicole Palmieri, the Director of Programs here at Springboard. If you guys, if you're new to the Springboard network, welcome. Just give a little bit background to Springboard. We are an accelerator that accelerates the growth of entrepreneurial companies led by women. We're focused on digital health and life sciences specifically. And so we are a global community of experts, as well as we're a leading network of influencers, investors, innovators, VCs, a lot of people that are knowledgeable in the network. And we're dedicated to building high growth companies led by women that are transforming industries. So just some little bit of data here. So we have, about 854 companies in our network. We've raised 89% of capital, $36.4 billion in value created, 26 IPOs, and 225 plus M&A events. Sorry, I'm just letting more people in from the waiting room. And this just is a little background for if you're new to the Women's Health Innovation Coalition. This is our framework for the health of women. So as you can see here, we have already ramped up our WIC series here. So we've already done everything here up to cardiovascular health. So that is the forum that we're doing today. And then our next forum will be oncology, which will be on October 31st. And this is just to oversee our series overview for you guys. So if you're interested in oncology, we'll send out some information later on after this forum as well, just highlighting that, and that will close out our forum series for the year. So I just want to introduce Tara Robinson. She will be our moderator today. She is the founder and CEO of Black Heart Association. Tara.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I was just sitting here and I was like, wow, I'm amongst this group of beautiful women. And so I just want to, celebrate y'all. Can y'all hear my music? Can y'all hear it?
There we go.
Yes, I'm sitting here with all these beautiful, bright, talented women. And I just want to say hello, everyone. I see a couple of men in there. Hi to you too. We always got to have one come on in and join us. So am I going right into the presentations? All right. Okay.
Well, you can give your little bit of your background and your bio first, Sarah, if you don't mind, and your journey, and then we can jump right into our presentations.
Okay, sounds great. So I want to go ahead and jump in and talk about the ladies, but a little bit about myself. My name is Tara Robinson. I'm the founder of Black Heart Association. I am a 3-time heart attack survivor. So that's kind of how I got into this work in this vein of public health. We currently, well, let me go back. When I say I'm a 3-time heart attack survivor, that means I had 3 heart attacks over the course of 3 days. The first day I was told I was having a heart attack, but yet I was told I had the symptoms of a heart attack, but still sent home and would follow up with instructions to follow up with my primary care. Then the next day had another one, spoke to the cardiologist. After a little advocacy for myself, I was able to stay overnight and was released at 11 o'clock on the 12th. And on the 12th at 4 o'clock, I was going back having a massive heart attack. Went into sudden death on the operating table. And I've been fighting and volunteering ever since 2014. Started Black Heart in 2017. I renamed it after losing my brother-in-law. He dropped dead in front of my niece and nephew from a hypertensive heart attack. And so that's when the name became Black Heart, because I had to take his black suit to the funeral home. And we know that it is the number 1 killer of Black women. So I just don't want any of us to have to go to a funeral or wear that black. So that's why the name change happened. And we're out every weekend screening our community, allowing them to know where they stand as it relates to heart disease and stroke. And absolutely everything we do is absolutely free at Black Heart Association. So just a little bit about what we do. Am I up again? Because I'm excited. Let's jump on in. Oh, they telling me to hold on, y'all.
Sorry, I was still muted. Yes, you can jump right in and introduce our founders and funders.
All right, founders and funders. So let's get started with Miss Sonna Raymond. So much, oh my God. I was reading your bio and I was just blown away. You have 20 years of experience in medical therapy as an executive and as a scientist. She thrives in environments where order must be created out of chaos, especially when technical language needs to be translated into clinical and commercialized outcomes. She is currently CEO of NuPulseCV and has led the company's team of 25 plus staff to revenue generation, successful launch and completion of an FDA-approved first-in-human and feasible study, including CMS device reimbursement. Most recently, she led the team to obtain FDA approval for a pivotal trial for a marketing application. Sonna has a unique perspective of product development due to previous experience at FDA and consulting with business development experiences to know what is required for medical devices to get from concept to market. Prior to joining NuPulseCV, Sonna served as a leader at the Center for Device and Radiological Health at the United States Food and Drug Administration. She has worked on multiple projects related to artificial hearts, transcatheters, heart valves, and other cardiovascular device products. She has been involved in many of the approved heart assist and transcatheter aortic valve devices currently on the market. In her free time, Sonna plays piano and is a board member of the Council for Entrepreneurial Development, North Carolina, and Jeezy's Playhouse Rally. You're busy. So next up, we have Alicia. So let's see what we have to say about her, because y'all, I'm just blown away about all the accomplishments that these bad ladies got going on. And we use bad as a term of endearment around here. Okay, so keep doing it, ladies. Alicia Rodriguez is CEO of WomensHeart. She graduated in electronic engineering and computer science, along with integrated design and management from MIT, where she researched sex-specific generated biomarkers at MIT Computational Cardiovascular Research Group. She received the MIT Graduate Women of Excellence Award. She has also been recognized as a 2021 TED Fellow, 2018 MedTech Boston 40 under 40 healthcare innovator, and in top 100 female founders by Inc. Costa Rican Peruvian engineer, I want to make sure I'm Ms. Rodriguez, is founder and CEO of WomensHeart, a company generating novel digital biomarkers by transforming everyday bras into smart medical devices that gather often overlooked data on heart disease in women, a frequently misdiagnosed and under-researched killer. She has dual degrees in electrical engineering and computer science, along with integrated design and management from MIT, where she researched sex specific. So I think I kind of said that, so we know what our girl does. Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Sonna are doing their thing. I'm gonna go ahead and let them speak.
So thank you very much. I did not realize you were going to make that long, read it out loud, that long introduction. Before we begin, I'd actually like to have Amy and Amrita go, because Amy, and she can, I don't know, Tara, if you want to introduce her, Amy can talk about the patient journey. And then Amrita, who's a cardiologist, will be able to speak to the patient's journey from a clinical perspective. And I think having Amy and Amrita go first will really set the stage for what Alicia and I will then talk about from a founder's perspective. So Tara, do you want to read Amy's bio and then Amrita, and then both of them can go?
Okay. Did I do that out of order, guys? I'm so sorry if I did that out of order.
Okay. It's okay.
Okay, so here we go. Miss Amy Friedrich-Karnik is the Vice President of Advocacy and Communication at WomensHeart. She oversees the organization's policy, advocacy, communications, and marketing efforts to advance support and access to care for women living with and at risk for heart disease. Prior to joining WomensHeart, she was the Senior Federal Policy Advisor at the Center for Reproductive Rights, where she helped lead the center's federal policy work. She focused on developing and implementing strategy to ensure protection for reproductive rights and access to reproductive health care in the U.S., regularly engaged with Congress and coalition allies, and oversaw the Act for Women campaign. Previously, Amy was an independent consultant, providing guidance to nonprofit clients on policy and advocacy, development strategies, and project management on women's health and caregiving issues. Before going out on her own, Amy worked at a Family Caregiver Alliance and for U.S. Representative Jan Shaweski. Amy received a Master of Public Policy degree from UCLA. She is chair of board of director for NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia Foundation and lives in North Virginia with her husband and 2 children. Dr. Karve is an MD, FACC, is a cardiologist in Mount Carmel Health System, a large private community health system in Columbus, Ohio. She is founder and co-director of the WomensHeart program, a program created to increase awareness of heart disease in women, reduce gender disparities in diagnosis and treatment, and to provide a concierge experience for women of all socioeconomic classes to be more engaged in their health. Her novel program has been featured on local television stations, news outlets, and social media. She is a member and guest speaker for the American Heart Association. Dr. Karve is a board certified in internal medicine, cardiovascular disease, obesity medicine, and echocardiographic. Her special interests include women's health and innovative approaches to obesity medicine. So Amy.
Hi, I'm ready to take it away. I just want to be able to share my screen. Can you see the whole screen, or is it still the slides on the side?
Just the slides on the side. If you can do the presenter mode, then that would be great.
There we go. I clicked
Great.
it twice. Okay, does that work?
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tara. She just read the bios of everyone, and I'm very humbled and glad I'm going first on this panel. So I can tell you all a little bit about WomensHeart and heart disease in women, and then let these wonderful colleagues take it away. Before I talk too much about the organization and what we do at WomensHeart, I just wanted to ground us, since this is a group of experts who know a lot about a lot of topics, but I wanted just to ground us today in cardiovascular disease, and particularly heart disease in women. As was mentioned earlier, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in women, which is something that's been true for several decades now, but is probably surprising to a lot of people. I know for me, when I came onto the organization about 5 years ago, I didn't realize that fact either. So I think it's something that is really worth setting out at the outset. As an organization, though, what we focus on is support, because part of the problem is that there's inadequate support and research around heart disease in women, which is what we'll talk a little bit about more today. But 60 million women in the US live with cardiovascular disease. And while rates of heart disease have gone down quite a bit in the last couple of decades, we're finding that there's been a plateau in the last few years, even before COVID, and that rates of heart disease, surprisingly, are rising in women in the middle ages. So women between 35 and 64, we're starting to see increasing rates. So it's definitely still a problem. It's definitely still alarming. Awareness rates are also going down. The American Heart Association does great research about every 10 years around awareness of heart disease as the #1 killer of women, and do women understand and know the signs and symptoms of a heart attack in women. That research shows some gains in knowledge about 10 years ago, kind of on the heels of the Go Red for Women campaign at the height of that. And unfortunately, when that same research was done just a couple of years ago, those rates of awareness had gone down. So we have a lot of work to do to make women realize that heart disease is something they should be paying attention to, and that heart health should be a priority in their daily lives for healthy living. And another reason and kind of link, and something we talk a lot about, is the link between heart disease and maternal health. And so in the last several years, we've heard a lot of really great awareness raising around maternal mortality and morbidity, and particularly the crisis among Black women around maternal deaths, and heart disease has a lot to do with that. So that also has something to do with that rates of increasing heart disease among women in their middle years. So that's just kind of a foundation around what heart disease in women looks like today. So who are we at WomensHeart? We are a nonprofit national organization. We were started just over 20 years ago by 3 women who were diagnosed with heart disease, had heart attacks, and looked around and found very little support for them as women going through this journey of heart disease, and thought we really need an organization that exists to support women in their journeys and to show them that they're not alone, that also provides education around prevention and heart healthy living, but then also importantly does advocacy, and that talks about the needs for more research on heart disease in women, more participation by women in research and trials and being included, and a whole host of kind of policies that go around that. So that's what we've been doing for the last 20 plus years. Our mission is to improve the lives of women living with or at risk of heart disease while fighting for equity in heart health. Our solution is around making sure that women get gender specific and high quality care for their heart disease and for prevention. We are a community-based patient-centered organization, and kind of the heart of what we do is train women who are living with or at risk of heart disease to become what we call WomensHeart champions. So we've trained over 1,000 women in the last, since our founding. And these are women who volunteer to go to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester for 3 days and just learn everything there is to know about heart disease in women and how to support women, how to provide peer education and peer support. And after the training, they go back to their communities and they start and run support groups. They provide one-on-one support. They do community education. They're at health fairs and community events, tabling, anything and anywhere they can go to spread awareness about how to live heart healthy, what heart disease looks like in women, how to know the signs and symptoms of a heart attack. They're out there doing that, supporting their communities. So this is kind of what our network looks like. We've got champions in almost every state. We've got support networks in over 33 states. We also run what's called the National Hospital Alliance, or NHA, and we have those in about 10 states. And these are hospitals who are members of WomensHeart, and we work with them to make sure they have all the resources they need on hand for their WomensHeart patients. And one of our unique offerings is a program called Sister Match, which we've had around for many years, but recently became more technologically savvy with an app that we launched a couple of years ago. And this is where if a woman is newly diagnosed or is going into surgery or just needs that one-on-one support, she can connect with one of our champions to get that one-on-one support. And so we call them Big Sisters and Little Sisters. And with the app, you can now go on to the WomensHeart Sister Match app and you type in your information and kind of create a profile, but then you can scroll through the profiles of our big sisters who are trained to provide peer support and find someone that you want to connect with to get, to be able to just ask what you need to ask or just get the support you need. What should I expect and, going into the surgery, or how should I expect to live with this new diagnosis? What does that look like? So you can find someone maybe with your same diagnosis, or someone in your age group or in your geography. It's all kind of available there on the app to get that one-on-one support. And before I hand it over to these other speakers, I wanted to talk about just 2 of the issues that are particularly important to WomensHeart and have been part of the work we've been doing over the years when it comes to advocacy. And one of those issues is around being included in cardiovascular research. So we've been engaged with NIH and FDA and federal policies related to medical research. We are constantly advocating for more funding for research, but also for policies that require that the right representation of patients are included in clinical trials and in medical research. And that means making sure women are included, people of color are included, so that the trial participants match the people who experience the disease, and so that we have results and reporting from that research, so that when a provider goes to, prescribe medication or treatment to a woman sitting in front of them with heart disease. They know that the treatment that they're prescribing has been tested on women. They know how much to, what the prescription should look like, and they can trust that that works in a woman that's sitting in front of them. This is pictures from a briefing that we did on Capitol Hill a few years ago with one of our champions talking about her experience participating in NIH research. You have there in the middle, Dr. Gary Gibbons, who runs the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute at NIH. One of our providers over there, Dr. Eileen Sheesh, who works at the Cleveland Clinic, but just coming to Capitol Hill, coming to policymakers and talking about the importance of that issue. And another big issue for WomensHeart is around the issue of missed and delayed diagnosis of heart disease in women. Like Tara just said in her story, she went to the hospital, was sent home, went back, was sent home. We hear this story way too often from women who, either just they don't get believed, their stories aren't listened to, they're sent away and they come back. So we're talking about this for many years. We convened a group of experts in the beginning of 2021 to talk about solutions, to come up with what is a whole range of research questions that if we could just get a better handle on best practices around this issue of diagnosis, it would lead to better outcomes. So we have a report on our website talking about what are interventions that can happen with patients, with clinicians, and with healthcare systems. How can we get a handle on this so women aren't constantly being sent away? And then we did a video series of stories. And you see here 3 of our champions who have different and unique stories around missed and delayed diagnosis. So I encourage you to go to womenheart.org/misdiagnosis, watch each of these women have about a 3-minute video of their stories, and then get engaged in that work. So thank you all for that. I'm excited for the conversation to come and to take questions when it's time.
Thank you, Amy, for that wonderful intro to WomensHeart. So I am Amrita Karve. I'm a cardiologist and co-director, co-founder of the WomensHeart program at Mount Carmel Health Systems in Columbus, Ohio. It's a large multi-hospital health system, and we have created a novel heart program for women to help improve cardiovascular outcomes for women and to hopefully help in a small way to reduce gender disparities between women and men. So I'm going to just share my screen with you here. Attempt to share my screen with you. 1 second. All right, here we go. Whoops. No. See if that works. I will go into presenter mode. 1 second. All right, well, I don't know if this is. All right, so can you all see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So thank you, Amy and Tara. Again, Tara, your your commentary about being turned away and sent home is something I see very often, much more often than I would like to admit. And I think that we have a very robust heart program here. So it is definitely sad. I can't even keep track of how many patients I see who are like that. I don't really have a good explanation of why that happens other than that, it is easier to catch this as a cardiologist rather than an ER doctor because it is our specialty. And when you come to the hospital, it's first an ER doctor who isn't going to be as well trained as a cardiologist in catching heart disease. So definitely more education and more experience, but I'm glad that you got the care that you needed. And Amy, I have personally worked with your organization. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but WomensHeart is a wonderful organization that I have personally worked with. We sent 2 patients to the Mayo Clinic pre-pandemic to help lead support groups, and our patient constituents just loved that. And in fact, we actually had to stop it during the pandemic when everything shut down. And they have been asking ever since for virtual support groups. I was not aware that you had come up with a virtual solution. So that's wonderful. I know that
I will probably, have to talk later and see what we can do to get our patients involved. So when I was asked to give this talk, one of the things it seemed that people had the most questions about was how to drive up numbers in clinical trials, or if not in clinical trials, adoption of new devices and therapies. And so here's a very quick roadmap of what I'm going to talk about today. First, just the role of clinical trials in moving forward care for women, what happens at the hospital, and then, how to increase enrollment, increase adherence to therapy, and then how to meet more people so you can actually get the patients that you need. So as far as the role of clinical trials, it's, I was curious to see what exactly the rates are of female versus male representation, and it really is quite variable. Things have definitely improved since the 90s, since there were actual laws that were passed requiring women to participate in clinical trials. Some of the greatest underrepresentation is in immunology, nephrology, neurology, and oncology. The greatest is in preventive fields. So for those of you who have wearable devices, this is probably going to work in your favor. But fortunately, the median has been around 50% in more recent years, between 2000 and 2020, with the lowest being in 2002 and the highest being in 2018. And the disease category also has a lot to do with it. So actually, cardiology is one of the lower groups, one of the lowest. And so right now, the median for cardiology was actually higher than I initially thought. It was 40% in cardiology, but the range is like anywhere from 20 to 50%. And part of the difficulty with cardiology is that though women are, heart disease is the #1 killer of women, by the time that women are actually eligible to participate in, or by the time that women have cardiovascular problems, they're actually much older than men, because women tend to develop cardiovascular disease at later ages than men do. And it's actually less straightforward in the way it presents, and even the nature and the pathophysiology of the disease itself. For example, smaller coronary arteries, not like a single vessel lesion, more increased rates of diastolic heart failure, which is a type of heart failure that's harder to treat. All of those things make it more challenging just from a physiology standpoint to enroll women in clinical trials, along with the age, because then they have developed other comorbidities. But definitely, despite being the #1 killer of women, there are fewer women enrolled in cardiovascular clinical trials. So when we talk about enrollment, I think the one thing is to keep a very open mind about which institutions would be wanting to participate. So right now, the way that it works is that most startups and most innovators are located on the coasts. And so they're probably going to large academic centers to enroll in large clinical trials, but there is actually a huge untapped market of large private hospital systems all across the country that have these huge patient panels and actually see a higher number of patients and have faster turnaround than many of the hospitals located on the coast. So actually, there have been moves to try to tap into this market, and there is actually a whole new industry developing just to help enroll more patients in clinical trials and to reach more hospitals. So, for example, there is an organization called SiteBridge Research, which is an IRO that has created sort of a spin-off accelerator / consulting firm called Health 2047. And that helps connect small community hospitals with new startups. There's also different platforms that help increase visibility just to physicians. So there's another one called Cancer Trials App. I know we're talking about cardiovascular disease here. MedTrust, there's Clinical Trials 2.0, and probably many others that I may not even be thinking of that can help increase visibility. So I think just getting on other platforms where physicians can see the clinical trial will definitely help. And then when you're talking about the hospital itself, once you've found a few centers where you think that a study would be a good place to be done, there are actually newer techniques that are also being developed to help comb through these large data sets and patient populations that hospitals have. So a newer technology that's being implemented at our hospital is called natural language AI, and that is a new modality that's used to sort of interpret physician notes to try to determine who should be getting a certain device or procedure that you wouldn't otherwise have seen in the wild. So for example, the way that it's being used at our institution is to seek out which patients would qualify for a defibrillator that haven't gotten a defibrillator yet. And this is actually a study that's being done by my co-founder, Dr. Laura Gravelin, and she is, as part of the Women's Heart program, is looking for ways to help reduce gender disparities in devices. So she is using natural language AI to try to determine who still needs an ICD or an implantable cardiac defibrillator. And so this is able to look at a lot more values than a traditional algorithm would use to look at inclusion and exclusion criteria to see which patients haven't been seen yet. So for example, when you're a doctor seeing patients in clinic, at the forefront of your mind, when you have a clinical trial in mind, you're only going to see who's in front of you. Or even with an algorithm, there are certain limitations on that. But when you use natural language AI, you have the ability to scope out a lot more patients. In fact, this same modality was used in a recent study in the New England Journal looking at trends of transcatheter aortic valve replacement use. And one of the unintended but fortuitous consequences of using natural language AI was that it actually increased a lot of revenue for the hospital as well. So for physicians, one thing is to beyond the financial incentives for patients, but to encourage patients to feel reciprocity for future to advancing the field, and that will help encourage patients to enroll in clinical trials as well. So, once the relationship is established with the institution, the next step is submitting the IRB and then establishing a contract, with the device or with the startup company. And it depends on which institution it is. Sometimes they can be done concurrently. At ours, they can be. The turnaround time at private institutions can also be a little bit faster than academic institutions, but academic institutions can just in general have more resources and more know-how. With increasing adherence to monitoring during a trial or after, telemedicine visits or keeping things as remote as possible can help with the younger population, because then they don't have to think about things like childcare and making it to all of these doctor's appointments. But with the older crowd, actually in-person appointments might be more helpful, or they seem to like the in-person appointments more. And then making sure that there are no or minimal technological barriers and that there is adequate support staff. And finally, as far as meeting your match goes, there are many different places. Everyone knows LinkedIn, and I have heard of and personally experienced other startups reaching out to me on LinkedIn saying, hey, would you be interested in participating in XYZ, but also other professional societies like the annual meetings of like the American College of Cardiology or American Heart Association, other accelerator programs. Another helpful tip might be to actually approach fellows or physicians who are early on in their career and seeing if they would like to champion the cause and make it their baby for their career, and they might be more willing to do that and have more time to do that compared to somebody who is more experienced. And then finally, even though you might feel that at other startups, everyone already has their network, at least just meeting physicians who are participating in other networks, they might be able to lead you to someone that they know who can help you with your organization. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention is that in this whole process, as you meet your match and you go forward, it's also very helpful to have a physician advisor or a CMO in the subspecialty of choice that you are working on. So for example, there is one startup that I know about that is clearly doing cardiology research, but the CMO is an ER doctor. And just in terms of the logistics and planning for a certain study, it would be easier if that was already somewhat mapped out by a cardiologist as opposed to an ER doctor. So that's I hope you find that helpful. And I'm really excited to hear about these other startups from the rest of you.
Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing. So we do have a couple of questions that we kind of came up with before the event, but I wanted to jump in because Jessica, you were talking about the fact that how the signs and the symptoms are being missed as we go into the hospital as women, and some of the things that we're seeing constantly over and over. What is your recommendation, and what can change this? Because we know we've been talking about it, and Dr. Karve, you can even jump in there as well, because we've been talking about this for several years. I mean, I had my heart attacks in 2014, and here we are still 2022 having a conversation or making mention. How do we get people to not ignore what women are saying when they come into the ER or into the hospital in general? Any advice?
I can go. I can tell you what we tell women. I mean, we definitely want to see more provider education, a lot more awareness among ER docs and clinicians and all of that. But as an organization that speaks directly to women and to patients, our number one thing is to make sure they are aware of what those signs and symptoms look like, because it doesn't often feel like an elephant on your chest like you see with men or in TV. If you walk in and you tell the doctor, gosh, well, I'm tired and can't focus and it's hard to breathe, and you kind of describe symptoms that aren't just related to chest or chest pain, that's what often gets you kind of dismissed. So being able for women to understand that the symptoms they're experiencing may actually be a heart attack, and they can say to the doctor in the ER, I think I'm having a heart attack because these are the symptoms and this is what it looks like. That may trigger them to actually pay attention more to the heart. So for us, it's just constantly making sure everyone knows this is what a heart attack can look like in women. Go to the ER immediately if you're having these symptoms, and say them clearly so that you get paid attention to.
I would have to agree with that. I think the biggest thing is that women should be aware of the signs and symptoms of a heart attack. And unfortunately, not even all women recognize chest pain as a presenting symptom of a heart attack, which you would think would be like the most sort of obvious, but it's not. The other thing that is sort of like a funny unintended consequence of all of this thinking outside of the box of symptoms for women is that women may not then recognize chest pain as the presenting symptom, but think it's something else, and only think about non-chest pain related symptoms, thinking that, oh, women's heart attacks present differently. So it can sort of result in some convoluted thinking that ends up actually hurting them. But definitely chest pain is the #1 presenting symptom of a heart attack. And if anything along that spectrum, whether it's pain, pressure, tightness, women need to be educated on, and also, tell the ER doctor, I think I am having a heart attack, and that will definitely get their attention. I totally agree with you there.
Okay, and let me just ask one more small question that comes to mind for me as on the patient side. Is it, and I don't even know if it's more of a question or a statement, is it fair, and what would you say to a woman feeling like, why should I have to come in and advocate for myself during a crisis? I'm in crisis mode. The last thing I'm thinking about is that somebody's not going to have my best interests at heart. So what are you telling the people that don't want, that don't know the answers? And why should I be advocating for myself during a crisis?
So I think that no one knows your body as much as you do. You are the only one that's going to know when something is wrong. Even now, like for example, if you were to ever have symptoms again, you know what you felt during your last heart attack. The other thing that I tell people to tell physicians or the ER doctor, whoever's taking care of them, is that this is what it felt like during my last heart attack, and this is what I'm feeling now. And that is like a red flag sign. Everyone will pay attention to it, and that will definitely get their attention. It is hard to be advocating for yourself, but I think women tend to also downplay their symptoms and be like, oh, well, it's not that bad. But if it really is that bad, then you have to let someone know, because they're only going to interpret what you are telling them, but they don't actually know what you're feeling.
Y'all heard it from
And
her.
I would just add to say that to your first question, 1000% it is unfair. It is not something, and we have our patients tell us that too. Why do I have to come in when I'm feeling this way? And so that's why we want you to survive and live through it. So we want you to be armed with what you need to know to advocate for yourself. But on the flip side, it behooves all of us at advocacy organizations and others to do the work to create the system change, so that eventually you don't have to fight that hard, that clinicians have all the education, all the tools at their disposal to recognize what it is that's happening to you when you come in, so that you don't have to fight so hard to be heard and seen.
So what I heard from you ladies was, one, go in there and say, hey, I think I'm having a heart attack. That's stood out the most for me. 2, you know your body better than anybody else. And 3, it's unfortunate that we have to advocate for ourselves, but we almost don't have an option. So make sure to stick a pin there. One of the questions that came through was, we got social media. We have so much access to our fingertips.
Karen, I hate to interrupt. We're just going to stay on schedule. If we can just move to the next panel, that would be amazing.
All right. Okay.
Thank
Y'all
you.
keep me in line here, because I don't see the clock. So, you know, I can go on and on. So we're going to go on over to Ms. Rodriguez and Ms. Sonna and talk to them about what they have going on. So WomensHeart, you're up first. And I believe that is Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be here. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, it's such an honor to be here because I've interfaced with each of the panelists at some point of my life through building this company. As Tara mentioned, my background is in electrical engineering and computer science. And when I was doing my graduate studies at MIT, and I started learning about how crazy the world is today in terms of systematic issues around the healthcare system, where we're seeing so many disparities in healthcare, I felt the huge urge to do something about it. Today we've heard from the other speakers a lot of the issues that are in the system, like under enrollment in clinical trials. Until 1993, women were not even included in these clinical trials. And for me in the lab, I had access to huge data sets. And we were on the task of building AI and machine learning tools of the future. And I had a big question: how is this going to affect people that are not represented in this data if we're building all of the new technology around existing data, right? Like that for me was the major trigger of really trying to understand. And we realized, similar to other industries like the image recognition industry, actually natural language processing with voice biomarkers, there's a lot of biases already in those fields, because the training data used to create that technology does not include data from populations that are different. So we see that it performs worse in these populations. So with my team, me and my co-founders met at MIT, we decided we wanted to do something about it. And we created, this is a sneak peek that you see right here in this slide of our technology. It's a textile-based technology that can seamlessly integrate into everyday garments and collect very good quality medical grade data from the body. So again, the reason we did this, it's because we were seeing that there was no access to reliable data on women's data. The women's data was missing. We wanted to build next generation novel digital biomarkers. And the fact that it's missing is leading to expensive and adverse outcomes. I think it's clear that it's not fair that we have to kind of fight for ourselves to be heard. There's an invisible woman problem, but it's even worse to think that a lot of the things in the system are also not in our favor. And by this, I mean, earlier this year, the FDA released this framework to explore all of the issues related to underperformance of medical devices in women, right? Like devices themselves are being suboptimal for our bodies because they haven't been designed around our bodies. So in these documents, they demonstrated that women can have more complications with things like implantable cardiac defibrillators that were mentioned earlier because women were not part of their studies. Women are also, female sex can be a predictor of bleeding and death for different therapies. Also, sometimes they're not even eligible for therapies because of size, diameter, and dimension of the medical device. And one of the most common things in the guidelines from the American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association, if you're having a heart attack, since we've talked today about heart attacks, the standard of care today is when you arrive to the hospital that you get a troponin test. And it turns out that troponin tests are based on biotin technology. What this means is biotin technology is built with biotin, and a lot of the vitamins that women take, like prenatal vitamins, multivitamins, vitamins for hair and nail, actually have biotin. So if you go to the ER and you get a troponin test and you're taking one of these vitamins, it is probable, and the FDA has issued a warning around this, that you will test false negative. So you may be having a heart attack, but it doesn't show in this diagnostic test. And if in your ECG it's intermittent, that's why we hear so many stories of you getting sent back home. So from a technology perspective, we really need to do something that is really centered around women's bodies, women's lifestyles, what we know, designed for women's needs. And our team saw all of these gaps. We saw everyone talking about it. We talked to a lot of women, including Tara. I don't know if you remember, but you were one of the early people I ever talked to. So I appreciate it because it motivated me to maintain in this career path of building solutions where we see huge unmet needs. And we created the first medical device that is designed around female body at its core, right? And we call it the Lily. It's comprised of a bra that contains our medical grade textile sensors integrated into them. It communicates via Bluetooth to an app and uploads to the cloud to generate reports. We can use it for drug titration, to create natural stress tests, to collect real world evidence on how, in continuous monitoring on how things are affecting her body, and then also to be used in decentralized studies. And even in the near term, a lot of companies have approached us because they want to use it to enroll more women in their studies, since women have an easier way to get monitored at home, instead of having to use other cumbersome devices that sometimes, like stickers, kids can just pull it out because it's in a place where it shows and not optimal for her body. So this is just very easy to integrate and to have high compliance of the wearer. We designed it in a way where we could actually integrate it to any bra of her preference. It can be a wired bra, a wireless bra, a surgical bra, a nursing bra, sports bra, or even a tank top to sleep. What we measure in terms of raw data are multi-lead ECGs, activity posture, impedance measurements, respiratory rate. We collect some of her electronic patient reported outcomes so that we can learn how her signal looks when she's feeling symptoms, right? So we can understand better her patterns. and then a temperature in the position where we can get her basal temperature under the armpit, which there's a lot of evidence that shows that that's the optimal place for this type of medical grade measurements. So one of the things here is that all of this data that we collect in terms of raw data, we can use it for generating the next generation of digital biomarkers. And what we mean by this is right now we use traditional biomarkers like blood, urine samples, blood pressure, weight, for a lot of services, including virtual care, right? And these biomarkers are intermittent. They are like a snapshot, like think about it like a picture, right? A digital biomarker works more like a video, right? That allows you to even predict health outcomes a lot in advance because you can see baseline changes. So for us, it's like the woman's body is really amazing because there's a lot of things that, because we haven't spent from a research area enough time developing new tools for her, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit in terms of if you have the data, you can generate new digital biomarkers. And we're still using a lot of biomarkers that were developed such a long time ago, right? Like we can definitely do something better, and that's why we've built a platform like ours. This is my amazing team. Me and my co-founders met at MIT. We all have personal stories. In my case, I'm named Alicia after my grandma. She dedicated her life to women's health as an obstetrician back in a time when women were rarely allowed to obtain medical degrees. So I've always been really proud of her. But I lost her to a heart attack when I was 13 years old, right? And I didn't connect the dots until later on in life because, to be honest, I always looked at her pictures. She was always in a room full of guys. I studied engineering. Typically, I was 2 women in a class of 40. So I was like, oh, this is what Alicias do, you know, because I'm called after my grandma. And then one day asking my mom, because I was learning about all of this in terms of cardiovascular diseases and stroke, I know I have a sister that got breast cancer, and we're very conscious of getting screened and checked. And my sister survived, fortunately, right? Like it got caught in time, but I had never connected the dots that my grandma had died from a heart attack until I started studying this in the MIT cardiovascular, computational cardiovascular research group. So for me, it was like, wow, like we just don't talk about it. And I have family history, you know? So I learned a lot. It really keeps me motivated to change the way the system works, to make it more inclusive, and we can generate. We know it happens to a significant. I think someone had in their slide 60 million women in the U.S. It's huge. So we can definitely have an impact in this space. And just to wrap up, our company is called after Amelia Bloomer. She was a dress reform advocate of the 1800s who completely transformed the way women would wear clothes because she advocated for women to wear pants instead of these corsets that would damage her organs. And thanks to her, we had the first bloomers, which were the first undergarment pants that women ever wore. So following her movement, we basically think that technology can do so much more and even optimize our health. So that's kind of what we want to do. We want to bring women's healthcare into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, Alicia, you know, I love what you're doing. Amazing work. Send me a bra, girl, because I need to wear one. Just, you know, go ahead and do that. I would love to see some of the research and some of the things that need to happen in the cardiovascular space, make it down to the community level, because that's where real change is happening. And that information is worth so much. So consider that, everyone on the call. I know that we have some questions in the chat. Do we want to jump to that or go ahead and let Ms. Raymond talk?
You can go ahead to the next speaker, the next panelist.
All right, so Ms. Sonna Patel-Ramen, come on out, girl, to the stage. Tell us what you got going on over there.
Thank you, Tara. My name is Sonna Patel-Ramen, and I'm really excited to be talking to you today. I know we only have about 15 minutes left, so I'll try to be brief so that we have time for questions. So I think just to kind of reflect on where we started and now where we're headed in my talking points is to really understand the patient journey from Amy, to understand how can we get women enrolled into clinical trials from Amrita or Dr. Karve, and then to understand Alicia's story about developing devices that are directly targeted towards women. And then what I'm going to talk about is really taking the device from bench to bedside, and what that really means is hopefully to commercialization. And so just a quick background on me. I am CEO of NuPulse. We are developing a device, an implantable device for the treatment of heart failure, advanced heart failure. I don't often introduce myself this way, but I feel comfortable doing it in a community of mostly women and a few men. And some of you may be able to appreciate this, but I often only talk about my job, but I'm also a mom and a wife. I have 3 amazing kids. One of them also has special needs. And the reason I bring that up is because many of you who are succeeding in your field, like me, probably feel internally either a sense of bias from being a woman or even a sense of bias from being a mom. I often don't share with the team if I have to go pick the kids up from school, but that is very much integrated into my life. And I wanted to specifically mention that because I feel very successful in my job, and I also feel very successful in my life, but I often don't feel that way all the time about both aspects. So for those of you that are starting companies or looking for career progression or thinking about what's next for you, please know that it is possible to achieve. You just might not be able to have your cake and eat it at the same time. So as I mentioned, we're developing this device for advanced heart failure. One of my goals for our product is to make it not only accessible to the large number of men that suffer from heart disease, but also because our device is adjustable in its size, we are able to target populations that require a smaller device, largely women and eventually pediatrics. And so we have developed our device to the point of being able to have completed an 81 patient study, which has been really exciting. It was a first in human feasibility study, and we're getting ready to do our pivotal trial next year. What that means is if we're able to conduct that pivotal trial, get the outcomes we want, we then expect to commercialize in 2024. And so as a small company, we've been able to generate 2 million in revenue. As I mentioned, we implanted 81 patients. And then what I really want to focus on is the journey beyond that. So now we've implanted the patients, we've shown some success, but then how do we continue to raise funding and interact with potential investors, and in order to then take our device from bench to ultimately commercialization? And so some of the things that I have had to deal with initially is really building the company. So getting the right people on the team, hiring a diverse workforce, which is really important to me, reflecting the population that we're treating. So that means building a workforce that is diverse in terms of race and gender and experience. We have a great team with a lot of company benefits. And I also mention that because, again, as some of you go down that entrepreneurial path, you really are thinking about how am I going to build my team to ultimately be successful. And I'm touching on all of these topics only because we don't have a lot of time, but also because I really want to explain the entire journey from bench to bedside. So once you build the team and as you grow, you're now thinking about funding. At the end of the day, that product development life cycle is a story, and it is a story that you have to tell over and over and over again. And as you heard from Alicia, who did such a great job of telling her story, you get really good at it after you tell it a number of times. The challenge is that you're constantly shifting that story between the various stakeholders. And those stakeholders can be investors, people you're trying to raise money from, and even within those investors, you might have different stories depending on the type of investor. You're also telling a story to patients as you're trying to get them enrolled into your study. You're telling a story to clinicians because you want those clinicians to participate in your trial, and you want them to be the ambassadors to go out and then find these patients and enroll them in your trial. You also have a story to tell to the regulatory agencies. In my case, it's FDA being on MedTech. And then, of course, within FDA, you have drugs and biological products and other centers that you have to deal with. And then lastly, it is the payers. And that is often a little bit of a dirty word, right? Because you don't want to ever think that you are building a medical device, and most of us or all of us are all out there for the common good, but at the end of the day, somebody has to pay for it. And so you also have to be able to navigate the path to reimbursement and getting that device paid for, both by the government organization, insurance company, CMS, but also with private payers like Blue Cross, Blue Shield, United Healthcare, et cetera. And so as you navigate development of your product, whether it's device or drug, consider that you do have to share a different version of that story in order to target the particular stakeholder that you're talking to. And then lastly, to focus on fundraising. So we as a company have raised 60 million to date. We're raising another 40 now. And so we are on our D round. So we're really looking towards the end of our journey to get a round raised, or get this round raised, and then ultimately commercialize in 2024. And so much of fundraising, and this is really only a recent lesson that I have learned, is about networking. And I wish somebody had told me that many, many years ago. And the reason I say that is fundraising, as much as any other relationship that you have, is all about building trust. And the only way to build that trust is through communication, FaceTime, whether it's virtually or in person, but building those relationships where investors are getting to know you, they're getting to know your product, and they're getting to know your team. And when the time comes for that investor to make an investment, it has to be the right time, the right place. They have to have the right fund open. And so, I often use a dating analogy. Somehow I find this very funny. I think it's just like dating. You are dating or kissing a lot of frogs before you can get to the end. And a VC, a private equity firm, your angel investor, if you're at the early stages, I'm hoping to get a strategic before they're going to put a ring on it. And so starting early by exposing your product to these potential investors, and things as simple as saying hello at a conference or doing a follow-up call and asking for 15 minutes are incredibly valuable 3 years later when you are trying to raise your round of funding, and you don't want that time to be the first contact with a potential investor. And then the last thing I'll say is, the reason I bring this up is because you don't want to be calling people to raise money at the moment that you need it. And that's why it's so important to develop those relationships early and continue building them over the years or the life cycle of your company. So I know that was really brief. I do want to make sure people have time for questions. So I will stop there.
And again, if you guys have questions, please just use the raise your hand function so we can call on you individually. Thank you.
Great job, ladies. All I saw was a shirt that said boss. Yes, great job from the bras. I can't wait to see what's going to happen with that, because we do deserve to be in these spaces. We just don't think like men, and I think I'm grateful for that. So I wanted to ask about the funding part, because this is huge. And how do we go back and mentor those ladies that don't have this information about round funding A through Z? I feel like that's a whole thing and a whole bunch of letters within itself that we have to learn about. And how do we go back in this market where there's so much money to be made? How do we access it? What's the dirty truth about it? What's step one? Who's putting the book together to tell us what step one is to get in this game?
Well, so I'd love for Springboard to jump in here, considering that is part of your mission.
Yes, for sure. Obviously, we have programs based on that to accelerate the women-led businesses, to get them the exposure to the networks, obviously in their seed stage, in order to gain funding. So that's what's really great about being part of the Springboard network, is leveraging that network as well as getting those introductions and getting those face time with those individuals to get that funding. But I did just want to focus on the topic today. I know Amrita has a question, so if you wanted to begin, go ahead.
Thank you. Sonna, I briefly looked up your device. I would love to hear more about it. It sounds super interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about your vision and what it is?
Yeah, so we are building a minimally invasive percutaneous device, which really means you can put it in the cath lab and you don't have to have a surgery, which I'm very excited about. And it's really based on the natural cycle of how your heart beats. So your heart has systole or diastole, or contraction and relaxation. So some of these terms you might be familiar with. And it's called counterpulsation. So counterpulsation means that there's a device that looks like a long hot dog shaped balloon. It goes into your aorta, so it never has to touch your heart. And by displacing a certain volume of blood, as your heart is ejecting that blood out into your body, it facilitates reducing the amount of work that your heart has to do, and also helps to push blood into the other parts of your body. And then 3, it increases what's called myocardial oxygenation, or it increases the oxygen that your heart gets, which means it helps your heart be healthy, I guess. And so it's used primarily, currently it's in the hospital, and it's used as a patient comes in, likely with a heart attack or some very acute event. Our device is actually intended for that population, but largely for patients who can actually get out of the hospital and go home. And this is really important for women because, as Amrita was talking about, one of the biggest challenges to enrollment is the fact that so many women are primary caregivers. And so I'll raise my hand. Who wants to participate in a clinical trial when you have family members that need you or that you have to take care of? And so because our device allows patients to get back to a normal lifestyle really quickly, we are hopeful that we're able to encourage more women to enroll.
A million more questions for you, but I'll reach out to you.
We should talk separately. Yep.
Later.
Very exciting, the work that you guys are doing. I was reading up on that myself as well. I don't know how much more time we have left here, but are there, I think it wraps up at 1:15 you guys' time. How are you letting doctors and patients know about this new device that you guys have at NuPulseCV?
So it's funny, I just wrapped up an amazing conference last week. A lot of what I do at times feels like I'm a business person or a salesperson. So it is going out and introducing myself to clinicians whose papers I've read. So as I've done research into our product and the types of patients, I've actually just looked at the author list. And by looking at the author list, I will find out who I know or who can connect me to that physician, and then go and introduce myself or set up a meeting. And so that's been one of the easiest ways to make that connection, is finding a few advocates who then are also well connected to facilitate having those conversations.
Thank
like
you.
I'm going to reach out to Amrita after this and find out who, if she's interested or if she knows somebody.
Yeah, I would like, it sounds weird, but I would like to get a hold of your bra.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so it's interesting because we do similar to Sonna in terms of looking for those doctors that are at the leading edge like you are, you know, that want to make a difference in this space. We found that there is a big community of women in cardiology. So I think for us to meet, it's about meeting the right people to make this type of change in the system. So I think that's a big part. So yeah, looking forward to sharing more. We've been working, fortunately, with with doctors in hospitals and also with medical device companies and pharma companies that are also trying to make a big impact in disparities in healthcare and want to use our platform for that purpose.
Great, thank you, everyone. We're just going to move on to some sponsor comments. We want to thank Roche and Organon today for being our sponsors for this panel. And I want to give Amy some time, if she's available and still on, to just make some any comments or remarks from our sponsor.
Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are, everyone. My name is Amy Bruhn, and I'm on behalf of Genentech Roche. Stephanie Sossman was on earlier and unfortunately had to drop off. Won't take much time, just appreciate all of the conversations and both the expertise that Tara, you brought and your personal experience. Thank you so much for sharing. That really reinforces why this is such an important topic to be discussing, and Amy and Amrita bringing the patient voice to the discussion, as well as Alicia and Sonna, just the incredible work you're doing to advance the technology around women's health and cardiovascular disease. And just Roche and Genentech are very fortunate and appreciative of the opportunity to support Springboard enterprises in these forums to help to continue to encourage these discussions. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this today. And thank you for all of everyone's work towards advancing women's health with cardiovascular health.
Thank you, everyone. And then I just want to have some closing remarks. Again, just to highlight, our next and final Women's Health Forum series will be focused on oncology. That will be on October 31st, and we will be sending out some RSVPs as well as some more information focused on that forum series, and that will close out our year of forum series.